Thank you for joining us. Before we get started on today's episode, just a quick reminder to please smash the like button in the bottom right corner and subscribe to Locked On Senators so you can be the first to know when new content arrives. The best way to help us grow is to comment on the video as well. So let us know if this is a player you want the Sens to draft or you think they should stay away from, and let us know why as well. This is one of 64 draft profiles that we're producing, so let's get into it. All right, Pilsy, coming in at number 61, probably the man I'm most excited about on today's list, coming in with an average rank of 57.33, so a whole 10 better than Pearson in our rankings. Coming in at number 61, Paul Ludwinski from the Ontario Hockey League and the Kingston Frontenacs.
Yep, Kingston guy, so someone that maybe Sens fans, if you've been following along with Levi Merilainen, Ben Roger with the Kingston Frontenacs this year, you've got to see shades of what Paul Ludwinski can do, and I think he's a solid player. I mean, great rookie season for him. He led the Frontenacs in rookie scoring, and I was looking back at his first OHL goal, Ross, was a beauty breakaway goal. So you love when guys can enter the league and be like, all right, I've got a breakaway, me versus the goalie, and he can finish it. That was against the 67s, a little bit of a salt in the wound there. But the Kingston Frontenacs and 67s played a lot of games, so it's very likely that that's going to happen. The thing I found most interesting about Paul Ludwinski is he started off the season if you're a rookie in the OHL, being on the wing with Shane Wright and Martin Chromiak sounds pretty damn good. And that's your coaches being like, hey, kid, we're going to set you up here. But he didn't really have a lot of success there. And it seems like he's a guy that's going to project better as a centerman. So they said, okay, sure, you're playing with the top two guys, but let's move you down to the second line and let's get you in the middle of the ice. That's when he really flourished there. And McKean's Hockey, they do great stuff as well. We definitely use them as a source for our prospect profiles. They described him as a good skater with two-way awareness and good energy. So that's a guy where when you have a solid rookie season and you've got the right attributes, I think he has a lot of potential.
Yeah, so do I here when I'm looking at Paul Ludwinski as well. And when you're bringing up his play with Kingston, 16 goals, 27 assists, good for 43 points. And what I loved even more is 32 of his 43 points were primary. So he's a guy who doesn't need help getting set up as much. Like he's not a guy who's passing to the guy who's passing to the guy who's...
Yeah, he's not riding on Shane Wright's coattails is kind of what you're getting at.
He's certainly not. And the reason I took off that graphic so quickly is I forgot to update the ranking. So we're off to a great start. But we've got Craig Button here down at 85. And I'm loving the discrepancy between Craig and Bob because those are the two TSN guys. Bob McKenzie has him up at 42nd overall. So where's the tiebreaker? Elite Prospects, 45. So they both have him as an early to mid second round pick. And I'm right there with him because for me, the strength of his game projects so well to the NHL level. Extremely high hockey IQ, great edges, explosive skater, crafty and speed, and a guy who's realized that he's not going to maybe be the offensive guy he was in his minor hockey career. He was the 5th overall pick into the Ontario Hockey League draft. And then what would have been his rookie season ends up going down the toilet because of COVID. So he didn't play a single game all year long. That must be tough. Like we talked about last year, guys in their draft year. I think it's even tougher on guys this year because that's when you get your feet wet. You learn the league, you learn the schedule, you learn the training habits and what it's going to take from the veterans there to make it to the next level. He didn't get any of that experience. And then, as you said, he gets plopped next to the projected number 1 overall pick. No pressure, kid. And Martin Chromiak, a guy who's already torn up the league for 2-3 years. But you're right. A guy who, to me, is going to be a center at the NHL level. And to me, a guy who's got a very high floor, but also a high ceiling. So I've got him at 4.5 stars because I really like the creative aspect of his game, but mixed in with the compete level that at the very least, you're getting a bottom 6 grinded out centerman who can win big faceoffs for you. But if he can work on that offensive consistency, which is far from proven yet, he could be a second line center if all the cards fall his way.
Yeah, and I think Tony Ferrari, our good friend who's been a recurring guest on the show, he kind of mentions that just because he doesn't have that offensive consistency, Ross, doesn't mean he's kind of a waste of space out there. He's doing so many other good things right. He has high hockey IQ, and he's able to be effective in the game in other spots. So I think that's something great about Paul Ludwinski that we like. And I was gonna have mine at just 3.5 stars, but I'll bump it up to 4 because I think he's a really interesting prospect. And Shane Wright probably going to be playing in the NHL next year. So hey, that top center position, that's up for grabs. And I think our friend Paul Ludwinski here has a great opportunity to snag that and elevate his role with the Kingston Frontenacs. So I'm going to be dialed in on him for sure. And it's always nice to get another Sens prospect in the mix. It makes it a little easier for us to follow along. So that's a bit of a bias as well. So 4 stars for me for Paul Ludwinski.
Well, we know there's a connection to the Sens organization with the general manager, Corey Cooper of the Kingston Frontenacs, the former goalie coach in Belleville. And get this, Pilsy, Paul Ludwinski, born April 23rd, 2004. That is the same week the Toronto Maple Leafs last won a playoff series. And he's 18 years old.
That's great. That's great. And he's a Toronto guy, so he would know that.
Yep. Pickering, Ontario, 5'11", 170 pounds, left shot centerman. If you're watching there as well, 43 points. We mentioned, look at that though, 12 points and 7 goals in the playoffs with a +11 rating. So you wonder if maybe that's a sign of things to come next year. To me, this would be the type of pick where we mentioned elite prospects, 45. We mentioned, guys, Bob McKenzie has him in the 40s, but Pilsy, the Sens could take him 38 or 39, get laughed at, and then all of a sudden next year, the offensive numbers explode and rounds out his game. This is a guy, I mentioned 4.5 stars. There's reason for it. This is the kind of guy, if the offense clicks, all of a sudden, he's a first-round talent. There's no question in my mind. And I'm willing to see,
no question
willing
in your
to
mind.
bet.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I'm just seeing what he's done growing up and to have the pedigree to be a 5th overall pick in the OHL. Yeah. I just think that we're going to see a lot from this draft class where that lost year is glaring right now. But over the next year or two, there's going to be some guys who haven't been able to scratch the surface yet, but are going to bust through it next year. I think we're going to see a lot of old takes exposed by Christmas next year from these rankings coming up.
Yeah, and I think this is something we've never really had to deal with. I think that COVID year loss to junior teams, especially the OHL, which had literally 0 games played.
0. The only league who had 0.
Yeah. Whereas the Q and the WHL, they got some games done. It was a weird season for both of them, and it didn't really work out. But kids got on the ice, and they got playing competitive games. I think this is going to have a ripple effect for the next 2, possibly even 3 drafts, Ross, because losing that full season is going to be tough. But one thing is there's going to be guys who losing that full season absolutely devastates their development. Or there's going to be guys who made the most out of that, which, I mean, you can only do what you can do, but they stayed working hard in the gym. They stayed working hard on their skills, watching tape, all that kind of stuff. And I feel like Paul Ludwinski was probably one of those guys, seeing as he was able to hop into the OHL and have a good rookie season. So I really like what I'm seeing from this guy. And he kind of reminds me of Zach Ostapchuk, right? Like a guy that a lot of people say, ooh, there's like nice pieces here, but he hasn't quite put it together. Let's wait one more season and see how he does. We saw how Zach Ostapchuk did in his next season in the WHL. So I'm sensing kind of a big burst through, similar to Ostapchuk here.
I was looking at some old footage of before the OHL draft, Pilsy. I love this confidence from him. He compared his own game to Patrick Kane.
Not bad.
He said, I'm shifty and a creative playmaker. But again, Kane's a winger. Is Ludwinski going to be a winger or a centerman? I vote centerman. I'm excited to see what he's going to do next season.